Well, hello everybody, and welcome to episode number 12 of Cardboard Time. My name is Arwen, and today's episode is a little bit different because I have Lauren Yu here with me. She is the art designer for Tome, the Light Edition, which is now available on Kickstarter. Welcome, Lauren.
Hi, thank you so much for having me, Arwen.
My pleasure, and we are definitely going to get into the development of Tome in the second half of the show, but we do have some business to discuss first. I did get my first dose of the COVID-19 vaccine. I am super excited about that.
Congratulations.
Thank you. I don't know what the situation is out in California, if they've opened things up a little bit.
Well, they are planning to have vaccines for younger people available starting in April, so I'm hoping to get an appointment, but so far it's staying inside.
That's kind of what we've been doing here too. Mm-hmm. I was very fortunate. I was able to actually get a dose a little bit early. They've since opened it up. I believe it was actually today as we're recording this to everybody 16 plus here in Ohio. So that was really good. But I'm looking forward to getting back in person and gaming for sure. It's a theme that we've certainly talked about quite a bit on the podcast, but I know it's probably exactly the same for you out there.
Yes, I am really excited to get back into in-person gaming. I've actually gotten to see a couple of my friends who were in a really small bubble. We basically only have seen each other for the last several months. So it's just the three of us. We get together sometimes. We all are neighbors too. So thankfully safe enough that I don't ever feel like I'm at risk, but it's rare enough that we're not hanging out all the time.
That's one thing that's kind of helped us too, is the fact that we've had a couple of friends that have been in our bubble.
I think that board games and seeing my friends have actually been one of the main things that have kept me sane during the pandemic.
Same here, absolutely. So today's beer of the day, I actually went with something a little different. I got a local root beer here from a place called TJ's. It's a little local drive-in. I just wanted to change things up a little bit, and that was mostly for the fact that I just didn't want to have a regular beer today, so I thought I'd talk about this other root beer. But it was so good. We just happened upon this little drive-in burger shop, and they make their own root beer, and they wound up selling it in gallons, and it was so good that I had to go and get a gallon of it, and
wow.
That gallon is now gone. But it was fantastic. It was really so good.
Oh, that sounds really great. It's actually about 90 degrees out here right now, so a nice cold soda would be amazing.
Would be perfect. Any favorite beverages of yours, Lauren?
Well, I am a bit of a coffee addict, so it's usually what gets me through all my work, but I also get a Starbucks every day just to get me through the day.
Yeah, usually with me it's Tim Hortons. I don't know if you've ever heard of them at all.
I have, actually. My partner Anthony, who's the game designer for Tome, he's in Michigan, so I have actually gotten to have Tim Hortons a couple of times.
I grew up very close to Canada, so it's very similar circumstances with Michigan. I know that they're kind of all over up there, and I'm kind of in between where Michigan's got a bunch and New York has a bunch. They finally kind of filtered their way to Ohio, so basically that's what I drink, and I've been drinking since college, so fortunately now they've got them here.
I think I've only had it a couple times, but it's really, really good. I wish that they had them out here too.
Yeah, I don't know. They, at the rate that they're expanding, they may be out there fairly soon. You never know.
Definitely.
Well, it's always a good time at the beginning of the show to check the Shelf of Shame, and there has been so much action this week on the Shelf of Shame. It's been ridiculous. Normally with Justin, it's one off or two off or two on, and it's kind of gotten a little crazy. The official count is at 181. It was at 185, and I've had 4 new additions, which are the Lost Ruins of Arnak, very popular game, the Search for Planet X, Bristol 1350 was a Kickstarter that came in, and of course, Tome the Light Edition just happened to show up at my door.
So glad it got to you.
Somebody sent a copy of it for me to take a look at and review, which we will definitely talk about in the second half. Off the Shelf of Shame are 8 games. I was very productive in the past couple of weeks. The Lost Ruins of Arnak, I did play a solo mode of it, which was very, very good. I am loving this game, as well as The Search for Planet X. And that was a game that my podcast mentor from Boards Alive, Aaron, is a huge fan of and has kept talking about multiple times on his podcast. So I absolutely had to pick up a copy of it.
What kind of game is it?
Kind of like a logic deduction game. So you have these 12 sectors of a galaxy, and you're trying to locate Planet X, and you're trying to locate where each of these planetary kind of items are. So you have like asteroids and comets, and of course Planet X. Some sectors are actually empty, and all of these things kind of follow certain rules. So you have asteroids have to be next to each other, and empty sectors are next to gas clouds, I think. Was one of them that you knew right off the bat. And then you can do research to find out some of the other interrelationships between the different objects. So it's a lot of deduction and a logic puzzle, which really works well solo. I don't know if you've played any sort of logic or deduction games in the past at all.
No, not really, but I did love like detective novels as a kid, so I feel like I'd like to find those sort of games to play as well. Now that I'm getting addicted to board games.
This has been one that's been a little bit hard to find. I actually did wind up just getting a copy because it just came back in stock at my friendly local game store, and it was something that I was kind of searching out for a while. It did finally come into stock, but it's a very easy price point to get into. I think basically MSRP was like $40, which definitely isn't bad, and you get a great experience. So it's a really good, really good pickup. Yeah, for sure. Restoration Games, fantastic job. I am absolutely loving it. So Bristol 1350 is in the line of the Dark Cities. It was originally a trilogy, and now there's 4 games. But the way that the publisher has made the game look, it actually looks like a book. So it looks like a very old novel. So that when you're setting everything up, you kind of see like all these books kind of stacked up next to each other. It's really cool. Makes for a very nice set piece.
Yeah.
Edge of Darkness was a huge box game, and I've been curious because the box was so big I had to compare it to my copy of Gloomhaven. It is a very similar size, and the gameplay that is in that box is massive. There are so many options. It is such a cool mechanism with the cube tower that's included. I've always been kind of fascinated by cube towers and that, and AEG has really done a really good job of kind of using that in a very different way. And it also uses the same card crafting system as Mystic Vale does, which is another fantastic game of theirs.
I haven't gotten to play either of them, but I've heard of them.
And then Hand of Fate Ordeals is based off of the video game that came out a little while ago. And this was one that didn't necessarily get a huge amount of love when it was originally published. And I played the solo mode on that. It's a fantastic little solo mode. I wish the game actually got some more press and hype because, unfortunately, the publisher of not only the board game, but the game itself has gone under. So we probably won't be seeing a huge amount of content for that coming out. Grand Austria Hotel was another game that was a long time resident on my shelf of shame. And that finally made it off of the shelf. Again, another solo mode that was very easy to kind of get out to the table, see what the game was about. It's, I believe, still on the top 100 games of the BGG list, and very well deserved. It is such a solid game. The last two are, of course, Tome the Light Edition, a fantastic little game, and Autumn Harvest, which is a continuation of the Tea Dragon series. I love the artwork on this, and this was one that we were talking about before the podcast as well. It's so incredibly cute.
Yeah, I think that Arwen actually convinced me to go and check it out and pick it up from my local game store.
It's really, really wonderful. And Autumn Harvest can actually work together with the Tea Dragon Society as well. So you can combine both those games and play up to 5, which is really nice.
Oh, I love that. I love when games come out with modular or like expansions that just add to the content.
You kind of feel like you're getting your money's worth with it.
Yeah, and like longevity for the game, I feel like is really important because I don't want to play something just once. I'd like to play things multiple times with multiple like different friend groups.
And I think something like that can kind of help, especially if you have like a lot of characters or a lot of different cards. It can make it feel different for you as well. So you're not getting that same experience every time. That's a really good point. I did have one game that got purged from my collection, and that is a solo game called Friday, which I think I'm probably going to get a little bit of flack for giving up. It's a fairly popular solo game, but when I really looked at it and I played it again, I have so many great solo games I'm able to get to the table now. I think the pandemic has really kind of helped with that and really shined a light on the fact that solo gaming's a thing, and there's a lot of people who can't necessarily get together with their friends all the time, or friends might not be available. It's a very real thing that people kind of have that need. And I think that's very important to address. So,
yeah, I actually have never even really heard about solo gaming until getting into the board game community. And I'm interested in it, but I don't know where to start because I love playing games with friends. But you're absolutely right that with the pandemic, it's not really a thing right now. So might check Friday out.
Well, there's going to be an extra copy in circulation floating around there. It is a fine game. I just did not see it getting to the table all that often. There's a little bit of deck building in it, and it's a smaller package, which is always helpful. You're able to take it different places if you have a work trip or a little vacation that you're going on and you just need something to fill a little time. It's great for that. But again, I've got so many board games and so many great solo experiences that it just didn't really click with me all that well. So now we're going to get into what we've been playing. And Lauren, your first game, a very good one, which has been talked about quite a bit, but I'm interested to hear what your thoughts are on it.
I've been playing Root with my small group of friends. It's designed by Cole Whirl and published by Leader Games. They just had their Kickstarter as well for the Marauder expansion. I was completely enamored with the artwork. I saw it at a local game store where I was picking up magic cards. Anthony actually got it for me for Christmas, and it's been really the first time I ever played a war game like this. But I would die for any of these cute little creatures. And there's just so much politics in the game lore as well as just playing with friends that I live for the drama. I always pick the vagabond, so I'm outside of it, but definitely like still important enough that people pay attention to me.
And that's actually the character that I kind of gravitate towards when I play it as well. That's the fun thing about that character is it's just kind of that little X factor that roams around and plays all the different sides, but you also have to watch out for them too.
Yeah.
As all these different sides are going and doing their wheeling and dealing, the vagabond can come in and just steal everything from all the rest of the players. I think it's a very, very fascinating mechanism.
Yeah, I love that each side has its own specific win condition and very specific strategies to the faction. And me being the little vagabond that I am, getting to just swipe it all like underneath them.
Have you played any of the expansion content yet?
Well, I definitely did just splurge on the river expansion and haven't gotten to play as the river folk or the lizard cult, but I also got the vagabond expansion, so I did get to try out some of the new ones.
Yeah, I just haven't been able to kind of get any of the expansions. It always seems like I'm either late or I'm hearing about it, and then, something else comes up that I want to go and back, and then I forget that this is a thing too. So I'm always just kind of missing that.
At first, when I saw it, I saw all the expansions that were out up to date, but then for a while, I didn't see them in any of my local game stores, and I'm guessing it was just that people were picking it up.
Oh, it was insanely popular, I know, for a very long time. And I originally saw they didn't even run a demo, but it was I think at 2017's Origins, they just had a little display and they had the meeples set up and they had the forest set up. They had the board set up, but they didn't actually run demos on it. And it was one of the cutest things I've ever seen. I'm like, oh, I need this. This is going to be good.
I'm a big fan of the meeples. This might be controversial, but I don't really like the normal meeple shape. So seeing the cute little like critters, it makes me like love meeples like way more.
Any particular reason why you don't like the meeple shape?
I guess it's just a little boring to me. So I like the fact that with Root, they take the time to craft individual shapes for the factions. And it just adds like a lot more of like a charming look to it. And for me, who is an illustrator and designer, it just gives me like a feeling that there was more care put into it or like time put into the design.
It kind of makes the board pop a little bit more. It makes it feel, to me, like a little bit more lifelike. If that makes sense. Yeah, you feel like there's kind of more going on as opposed to just standard meeples. I can definitely see that.
Yeah, it feels a bit more immersive into the world.
It's very interesting that you bring up the fact that it is a war game, because I never even realized it until it was brought up on a podcast, and I had heard that, and I'm like, oh my god, this is a war game.
I feel like it gives an entryway to people who might not like war games or might not like the concept of war games, a way to be introduced to the genre with cute critters. But then you see that there's so much strategy and really in-depth thought in the gameplay. I actually feel more enticed to check out other war games just from playing Root.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that. I haven't sought any out, but it definitely kind of made them feel more appealing to me after having played it.
Yeah.
Now, this is 100% my favorite of the Leader Games line. I have not played Trick or Treat or Oath yet, but I have played Vast and I've played Fort. Root is definitely my favorite of them. I had a horrible history with Vast, I'm going to admit. I found it horribly difficult to learn. We tried sitting down and picking it up a couple of times, and I love the concept of it. I love the fact that you have these wildly asymmetric, basically different games kind of going on all at the same time. The problem is that when everybody at the table is trying to learn at once, you have to teach individual people their character and then how they have to go and win, which you have to do en route as well. But the way that they have kind of included sample turns en route, and here's your first two turns, here's what you're going to do, here's why you're going to do it. I really give them a lot of credit for overcoming that, because that was a huge issue with me in Vast.
Yeah, I I think that if we didn't have the first two turns playable, it would have been a lot harder and taken a lot more time to learn how to play the game. But it felt like having that like training wheel, sort of say, for your first like game really made the learning curve a lot lower and easier as an accessible game.
I was extremely impressed with that. And that's something that I do need to go back and revisit the game because it's been a long, long time since I've played. I haven't played it with my girlfriend, which I really need to go back and do because I think that, she would get a big kick out of it. She's a big fan of Everdell. Anything cute can usually get her to the table and, usually the same with me. So anything else on Root?
I'm excited for the Marauder expansion. I think that that's going to be a game where I'm going to get all the expansions. I really, really enjoy it.
Yeah, I think it's fantastic. It's a staple on my shelf, and it definitely is not going anywhere, and that is Root. So I had the opportunity to play a game of Steam Up, which is not yet released. It is due for a Kickstarter in October of 2021. It is 2 to 5 players, plays in 40 to 60 minutes, designed by Heyman Lee, Marie Wong, and Pauline Kong, and Pauline actually did the demo for us, and published by Hot Banana Games. In Steam Up, players are customers at a world-renowned dim sum restaurant located deep in the mountains of a mythical land. Players accumulate tokens to eventually acquire dim sum steamer baskets and score points based on the contents of the basket and their player preferences. The player to get the most hearty points at the end is the winner. Hot Banana Games was actually running open demos, and I kind of had seen this on a few different social media outlets, and I said, I definitely want to check this out. This looks so cute and so incredible, and I found out quite a bit about the game since then. So it was a finalist for the Cardboard Edison Awards. It is Hot Banana's first game and self-published. Kind of a light to medium weight game as well, and mostly set collection. So you have these dim sum in these steamers that are stacked up and then placed on a Lazy Susan, and the board actually rotates as well. It's wonderfully designed with these physical components and how you use them. I think that they did a fantastic job with them, and I am horribly drawn in by the 3D components, especially games like Zolkin, Praga. That was kind of the most recent one with the wheel that rotates and a little cube that drops down, which I talked about a couple episodes ago. I'm really fascinated by those kind of physical mechanisms in a game. So you have different variable player powers that kind of change how you want to collect that dim sum, which are based off of the Chinese zodiac, and they're actually worth different points based on your character. So I really like that. There is a lot of take that potentially. There is some inherent randomness with how players are going to go and move the dim sum baskets, but there is also a lot of removable randomness that you can add or subtract certain cards from an event deck that comes up so that, you can kind of take some of that randomness and take that away. I do like that when you can kind of take that out for players who don't like it, or add it in for those who do. There's also a lot of neat little cultural nods to eating dim sum. So one of the things was a teapot with the lid ajar and to the side to refill the tea, how the chopsticks were placed. I thought that, and that was kind of all explained to us during the demo, so there's a lot of nice cultural representation there as well. Plans for the deluxe Kickstarter is to make the dim sum the same material as the squishy berries in Everdell, which I absolutely love. And I think it's called TPR, if I'm not mistaken, but obviously I couldn't feel it playing on Tabletop Simulator through this demo, but I could kind of see how that was going to be really, really satisfying. So, like I said, it is an October 2021 Kickstarter. The price has not yet been released on the different options that are going to be available, but I do feel like this is going to be a pretty easy back for me. With the gameplay, with the kind of weight that I can get newer players to the table with it, the physical presence of it, I think there's a lot of great things. So I think it's all going to depend on the price, and when it comes out on Kickstarter, I guess we'll find out. But have you heard of this game
Yeah.
at all, Lauren?
I think I might have seen it floating around online. I'm very interested in it. I remember growing up going to like my local like Chinatown and eating dim sum with my family. So I would actually love playing a game like this.
It was really well done. I was amazed, and I did see a lot of postings about it on social media channels. So I'm very glad that I got in on this, and I think they are running open demos as well. I might have to shoot you over the link so that you can schedule one and you can play it for yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd love that. Thank you.
Not a problem. So that was Steam Up. And Lauren, you had one last game that you wanted to talk about.
When my friends are done with the stress of Root, we like to bust out Poetry for Neanderthals, published by Exploding Kittens. I actually had seen it a lot on TikTok from a couple content creators, and it just sounded like so much fun, and I knew it was going to be hilarious. So whenever we're done with a more stressful game, we like to bust it out and just go caveman for a couple hours. The kinds of connections you make while trying to get your friends to guess whatever word or thing you're describing in one word syllables is hilarious. My friend got salad bar from green thing you eat. I definitely recommend it.
It sounds a lot like a word version of Ugtect, which was released back in 2009. Have you ever heard of that?
No, I haven't.
You're building up a structure, and how you put things down. Basically, you have a partner that sees the way that you're supposed to build this thing up, and they have a bat, and you have to go in and place all the things down, and if you're wrong, they hit you with the bat. I think it's twice, and if you're right, they hit you with the bat once, but you can't use any regular words. You have to use like these specific words and how to do certain things. So this is basically like one syllable words that you have to string together to try to get people to guess what you're thinking.
So you have a timer. I think it's about a minute. You get your partner to try and guess as many words in the time limit, only using one syllable words to describe what it is. And if you use a word that has more than one syllable, you get hit with the bat and you don't get the point for the card.
So I can definitely see how that would be a wonderful game after something that is much heavier. I think that's something that a lot of people in the hobby kind of forget every once in a while, is the fact that you definitely need games like this to kind of come down from an experience like a Root or, something of a heavier nature where you just want to be silly and just kind of have a nice relaxing time. You can also warm up that way as well. So I think that something like that is a really good investment too.
Yeah, definitely. I think that having something that's a little bit more lighthearted and silly to start off the night or end the night is a really good game to have.
Yeah, for sure. Anything else that you want to say about it?
I would definitely say you should go pick it up, or another game just like it.
I think this one might be on my list to check out for sure, especially with in-person gaming coming back. I could use something kind of light and fun like this with a large player count. Looks like fun. Well, stay tuned, because up next we are going to talk with Lauren about Tome, the Light Edition, and you won't want to miss this. Stay tuned. And we are back. Well, Lauren, we are going to talk about your game, Tome the Light Edition. And I've played it, but for our listeners at home who haven't had an opportunity to play it or check it out yet, can you tell us a little bit about it?
Yeah, so Tome the Light Edition is a trick taking card game with a magical twist. It can be played in teams or as a survival free for all with 3 to 4 players, and it usually takes about 30 to 40 minutes to play.
I actually got the chance to play it over the weekend in preparation for this interview, and I will say that the biggest thing that kind of struck me about the game was the art design. I really loved it, and it just kind of evoked a little. I don't know. It was almost kind of medieval, elemental theme. I also noticed on like the water cards, there were little fish on the fringes.
Yeah,
Those were super awesome designs. What
thank
was your
you.
inspiration for the art design?
So, actually, you kind of hit the nail on the head with that like medieval vibe. I was really inspired by old school tarot cards and stained glass windows like you would see in churches. My partner Anthony and I talked a lot about wanting to convey a bright, mystical vibe for each element. And for me, with the stained glass window, I like the idea of like you're peering kind of into the window of each element's raw power. But it was also a challenge with making each element cohesive, but also very different in the design approach. And then another inspiration that I had was with Art Nouveau, specifically from like the 1920s, as well as Alphonse Mucha's work. The backgrounds, as well as just graphic design and his paintings, were always something that I loved looking at in school. And I really wanted to try and bring that inspiration into the designs of the cards.
I guess until you said Art Nouveau, I hadn't really thought of that, but that's very evocative now that I have that in my head. I'm like, oh, it makes that pop out a little bit more for sure. And the
Thank
stained
you.
glass mention as well.
Thank you.
So we've talked to quite a few designers in the past few episodes that have been working on games during the pandemic. And can you kind of take us through your journey of the design and working during the pandemic?
Yeah, so I actually graduated in spring of 2019 and was, kind of working on like freelance work up until the pandemic hit. And my partner Anthony, he was actually let go right at the start of the country like lockdown. So for both of us, it was kind of a difficult time in terms of work, and we didn't really know what we were going to be doing since we everyone was saying like, oh, this is just going to be a couple weeks, then it dragged on and on. I mean, we're still
And
here.
yeah, a year later, we now know
Yeah,
better.
exactly. If only we knew. But we kind of saw that this was going to be a lot longer of a ride than people were saying. So Anthony thought that I think this is the time to really work on Tome. He actually had the game mechanics done for a really long time. Like the way it's played, aside from a couple like spell updates here and there, has been the same for the last several years, actually.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and it's been a really solid game since the start. And working on it was a little bit more spending 2020 with him researching how to publish it, while I spent a couple of months researching like the things I mentioned before, like Mucha's work with Art Nouveau and stained glass windows, and actually elemental depictions in stained glass windows, until I could translate that into my own style. I always kind of had that idea in my head when Anthony first showed me the game, and like I played it and thought, what would I do with it? When he first showed it to me, it really did need a facelift before it could get published. But I knew that I wanted to work as hard as I could on it so that it could represent how fun of a game it was. And so far, we've gotten nothing but praise for the artwork.
That's certainly something that came from Allie when we first sat down and I opened the box and showed her the cards, she mentioned the artwork like very first thing. She goes, "Oh, that's really pretty. I like that. That's really evocative." So
Thank
it's
you.
becoming more and more important, I think, and we'll talk about that in just a minute. But I did want to get back to one comment that you said, and the fact that when you have a prototype of a game, and this can be, sometimes I've seen prototypes that are fully fleshed out and
Hmm.
perfect, and hey, this could go on the shelf tomorrow. And then there's other prototypes that are just white everywhere with black lettering and just
Hmm.
bare bones. Here's basically the mechanics of the game laid out in front of you, no artwork. And that's fine when you're trying to work out the bugs and that, but really to make it sellable and to make it, something that can be on the shelves, I do think that that's very important. So that's a really good point.
Yeah, I think with how many people are going into making board games, it's really important to have a prototype like at the ready that's more than just flashcards.
I have to ask how you first got into the hobby. I've mentioned my story before on a very early episode. How did you first get into board gaming?
Well, luckily, I've been playing board games with my family since I was young, mostly chess and Othello. My
Hmm.
dad was really into those sorts of games. So we had them at home, but I never actually played things like Monopoly or Uno as a kid. And then going into like high school and throughout college, I would go to a lot of like parties, but they were mostly like nerdy parties. So we would always have Smash Bros on the TV or Magic games happening in some table.
I didn't realize that there were any other type of parties that were out there.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't have wanted to go to anything else, so. I think that also, with games like Cards Against Humanity, they got really, really popular like, the last, like, I would say like 10 years or so. So once
Hmm.
like that popped up, like it was like an immediate buy and all my friends were into it. And I love games like that. It got really easy to see more games made for people, and board games just kind of like made like a resurgence recently.
Hmm.
And I would buy one here or there, but then really getting into the board game community to launch my own Kickstarter, I started seeing things that I wanted to buy, and I was like, well, I'm an adult now. I have my own money, so I can start buying and building a collection, and it's gotten dangerous.
It gets real dangerous real quick. It's a crazy hobby, and the fact that
Hmm.
especially once you start seeing all these different themes, things that kind of resonate with you or just seem neat, and you just look at it
Hmm.
on the shelf and say, "Oh boy, that would be fun. I'll pick this up." And then you see the game that's next to it. Oh, that looks fun too. I'll pick that up. And, $400 or $500 later, you start amassing a collection like I have.
Yeah. I totally feel you. I was at a board game shop the other day, actually, pitching Tome, and
Mhm.
I walked out having spent $40 on the route expansion.
Yeah, it's so easy to do, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
So you and I are a lot alike when it comes to only recently discovering trick-taking games that we like. Can you take me through your process of discovery?
Well, I mean, this is going to sound really, really cheesy, but Tome was what got me into trick taking. When Anthony first came to me asking if I would be interested in working on the game, he convinced me by getting me to play it. I'm a very competitive person, so I really like using like my brain to play cards and win and beat my friends. So getting to learn what trick taking was through the game that I would be working on felt like a really great opportunity, because if I feel like if I had no background, which I didn't, having a passion for the thing I'm working on because I genuinely find it fun would really help with making sure that I was pushed to do the best work that I possibly could. But then I also learned how to play euchre, which Tome was inspired by, which is it's a lot of fun. And it was confusing at first because I expected it to just be Tome with normal playing cards, but I found that it had its own charm too.
I could definitely see that, and I'm actually thinking about starting to go back to those older games and starting to look at them again through a little bit of a different lens. As female gamers, I think that we're both very interested in the topic of inclusiveness in the hobby, and in my perspective, how it's grown, and in some ways, how it could be kind of improved. Can you tell me some of your thoughts on the topic?
Yeah, so after I'd finished the initial artwork for Tome the Light Edition, I went into more of the marketing side, looking for reviewers such as yourself and just people to collaborate with checking out the game. But I found that, the majority of board game reviewers were straight white males, which I also found that in the maker side of things, it was quite like the same. And I felt that it was just a bit difficult to connect with some of these creators because they might not have that same point of view as I have, as well as I think just gamers in general. There's that sort of like looking down upon women trying to enter the field, that they don't take it seriously, that they are just there for the cute things, even though liking cute things is just as valid.
It absolutely is.
It just feels like I wanted a place where I could break into with my own perspective and my own like voice to try and make a way that more games could be made as well as enjoyed by women, especially POC women. I feel like Asian aesthetics also are used a lot in board games, but then I get really excited about that, but then I find out the team is all white, and it makes me feel like, was this made by people like me, or was it made to just kind of like sell our culture? And that's something that people can talk about for hours, I'm sure, but I think that it's really important to have an inclusive space that women and POC can come into and create for people like us, especially like earlier with Steam Up. I loved hearing that the whole team were of Asian descent working on that game.
I thought that was fantastic. I really did. And my podcast mentor, Aaron, has actually mentioned that on his podcast as well. That was really pretty inspiring to see that group kind of come together and be able to produce a Cardboard Edison finalist game that got a lot of attention. And, it's kind of proving that, women and POCs and a more diverse, broad community can go in and kind of get into designing and get into podcasting. I haven't necessarily talked about being trans on the show before, but that is something that I deal with. And as a creator, it just kind of goes on the back burner, and it's not something that's mentioned. And I want my work to kind of speak for itself, and I don't want it to be looked down on. So it's kind of like that balance of I want people to look and see, yes, there are people that are different than the traditional community, just the straight white male. One of the greatest lines I heard recently was, inclusiveness is not excluding. You're not necessarily, because somebody else is included, somebody else is excluded out of the community. You're just bringing more voices and more diversity. And I think that that's definitely a good thing. We're seeing that now with all these wonderful designs. One of the games that I talked about recently was Holy, which I never knew was a holiday. I never knew anything about it. They had a great cultural consultation team that came in and were ingrained in the project, were ingrained in kind of how the mechanics work. And I think that that's great. I think that more opportunities are, becoming available, but there's still a lot of work to be done too.
Yeah, absolutely. It's not like once you get to this point, it's all over and like racism is done or exclusion is
Exactly.
done.
Yep.
It's an uphill walk that you're always going towards, a better, more inclusive and safer like space that people can enjoy things together.
As games become a little bit more inclusive, do you feel that art design is becoming increasingly important in the hobby?
Absolutely. I think, earlier we were talking about the importance of prototypes nowadays. I think, especially even with the pandemic, there's a lot of people who are deciding to, pursue that dream of making a game. And from the get go, you can't, I think that with how many games are coming into the market, you can't do it alone on like a good concept. It has to have artwork and design that would support the gameplay because they both go hand in hand. And I feel like, when you go into a board game store, even like a Target or something, you'll see like the board game section and there's hundreds of choices nowadays. So having artwork that really stands out will get you that chance for someone to just pick it up and read it and see if it's for them. Even on Kickstarter, I found that having really strong and clear graphics has helped with keeping like backer retention. I feel like myself included, when I look through Kickstarters of things I want to back, if the graphics are like slapped together or there are none to explain like the gameplay and it's just a wall of text, I feel immediately turned off from wanting to like learn more. And that's not to say that this person might have had a bad game. It's just giving the information in an easy and digestible way and an appealing way is more and more important nowadays.
I absolutely agree with there being so many games on the shelves that it's very easy to pass over something that does not kind of stand out and draw you in and draw your attention. I think a game, I always go back to Great Western Trail, which, fortunately is having a little bit of a redesign and a reprint to make the front cover much more visually appealing. If I saw that game and didn't know anything about it, I would be like, okay, there's three people on the front of it. You got a cowboy and there's some old stern looking dude. Like, okay, nothing about that draws me in. Whereas a game that's very visually appealing and kind of draws your eye, that makes me want to go and pick up the box at the very least and say, okay, well,
Yeah.
what's this about? Look it up on Board Game Geek, see what the rankings are, see what the gameplay is all about. But that first initial draw, I think the artwork is incredibly important. I think that's right.
Yeah, and I feel like it's not just the artwork, but like the design and the user experience through the game. Like, we were talking earlier about Root and the first two turns being included in the game itself that for new players. I feel like it's a great example of game design and then artwork and graphic design coming together to let new players join in and enjoy this game, and why, game design and then art aren't two separate things. They're best when they're worked on together.
So that way the artist kind of knows the intent of the designer as well, and kind of vice versa.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. I had never really thought of it from that perspective, and we'll get into this question I think that you have for me in a couple of minutes, but I have a couple of stories about that as well. So that might have been good advice, for a younger version of me. Do you have a few favorite games that you'd like to share with us?
Yeah, I mentioned that I'm really only just diving into the board game collecting hobby now, but I've gotten to go to PAX South a couple of years now
Okay.
and picked up some really fun games. One that I definitely want to shout out is La Neckbeard by Jason Anarchy Games. It's a hilarious, I don't know what kind of game you would call it because I'm not super familiar with board game terms just yet, but you have like a deck of waifus you're trying to collect. and you are playing different cards as a neckbeard to try and entice the waifu to win her. And so it's things like studying the blade or Japanese 101. And it's so funny because it knows exactly the type of audience that would have a great time with it, and poking fun at that neck beard culture that is part of gaming. And I highly recommend it. It's great, great fun, hilarious artwork. It's pretty fast to play. And another really fun party game that I enjoy is Herd Mentality by Big Potato Games. So my friends were telling me that it's a lot like Scattergories, but instead of wanting to have like something different from everybody, you want to be within the herd, guess what everyone else is thinking. So you'll have a category like favorite kitchen appliance, and you're supposed to write it down and hope that you get the same thing as someone else, and then you get points for it. So it's almost kind of like how well do you know your friends too.
Oh, okay.
And I think it's just a really fun party game with a really great packaging. Like the whole box looks like a cow, and the black spots are like velvet. And to me as a designer, I love like little touches like that make the game or like the box a little bit more memorable.
It certainly would stand out on the shelf.
Yeah. And I guess one of my favorite games I definitely think most people would remember or recognize is Betrayal at House on the Hill by Wizards of the Coast. I don't know what it is about that game, but I guess it's because I'm usually really awful with horror movies that getting to play being in one is really appealing to me. And it's not as nearly as scary as watching a movie. So getting to go through a haunt with a traitor and with my friends is a lot more palatable.
That game is one that I have kind of struggled with. At certain points in my collecting career, I've thought about purging it out of the collection because it's so random, and then I'm like, no, but because there's certain scenarios that it's like, okay, the haunt comes and one side has a huge advantage. But that said, the stories that you get from that game are so memorable. The one time I threw a bunch of my friends off of a bridge, or there was one that we were like little small people and there was a cat that was chasing us and ate all of us, and we had to try to fly away on an airplane. I mean, they're so memorable, and I just think that if you can kind of get over that whole, well, it's not balanced.
Yeah.
It's not going to be. There's no way to go in and balance anything like that. You just can't.
Yeah.
It's almost impossible. But it's just such a fun experience. I absolutely agree.
Yeah, I think that's also something like you were mentioning, like the memories and the stories that come out of playing that game are what really endears it to me, is that the craziest things happen and the most insane rolls just happen, and you think the traitor might have the upper hand in one moment, but then it could like really easily switch to the explorers. And if you don't take it too seriously, I think that it's a pretty great game.
Now, do you have anything else that you'd like to discuss?
Well, I actually thought it'd be fun to ask, have you ever thought about making a game, Arwen?
So it's interesting that you asked, because I have worked on a game with Justin. We co-designed a game called Thriftin'.
Wow.
It started off as one of those note cards cut up and just a bunch of text in that. And the premise of it was essentially that you had a thrift shop and you were part of this community that was really kind of obsessed with thrifting. And each of these different items had kind of like a sentimental value to them. And the market worked so that basically each item had a price, and the price was magically correlated to the sentimental value of the object. And as people kind of ignored them and didn't buy them, they went to cheaper and cheaper and cheaper shelves. So they got cheaper as the rounds went on.
Okay.
And they were goofy things that were kind of inspired by our love for weird thrift shop stuff. So we had a bunch of very zesty items in there and weird CDs and, knockoff Nintendo games and stuff like that. Three Wolf Moon, that shirt was
Oh,
in there.
yeah. I'm a huge fan of thrifting myself, so I totally understand the weird things you find, and you never know you wanted it until you saw it.
It's really strange because you just have this kind of compulsion to go, and it would be something in a store that you'd look at and you'd be like, why did somebody make this? But then you go into a thrift shop and it's like, oh, I need this.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like a Hutzler banana slicer. I mean, how did I ever live without one of those, let alone 6 of them to give out as gifts? But they were only
Yeah,
50 cents a piece.
I think most of my wardrobe nowadays are just things that I've gotten from thrift stores. I've been looking for a sweater that says "World's Greatest Grandpa." I don't know why, but I want one.
For yourself?
Oh, for myself, yeah.
Perfect. That is fantastic. I love stuff like that. So no, we went and the game kind of evolved to the point that we put a little bit of like just basically like stolen clip art of all the objects on there, and the graphic design was horrible, but basically everybody was saying, in these forums that, hey, get your prototype out there and get the mechanics out there, and then somebody will see it. But I think that was fine at the time. But like we discussed, when we went to the speed pitching event at Origins, I think that was like 2019, the art was mentioned multiple times. They were like, well, is this the final art? Well, no. The art will definitely change. Like we had our own kind of concept of what we wanted it to be, but that came up multiple times.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, with the pandemic, that kind of got put on hold. And I kind of started up podcast, and that's been taking over focus as opposed to designing games. And Justin's working on one of his own right now as well, something different.
Yeah. Well, I hope you guys get to pick it up again. I totally understand. Like we were just talking about, like, the importance of art, and I think that if you really believe that you have a solid concept and you can get it put together, I would love to see what you guys do.
Yeah, absolutely. Someday it might hit the table again. We might take a revisit of it.
I found that when I had an idea, especially for like Tome or other projects that I've worked on, an advice one of my professors back in school gave me was kill your babies, which means that, if it's so near and dear and close to you, but it's just not working, you gotta exit out, and it'll give way for a better idea or a better process to start, instead of trying so hard to like cling on to something that you are so like in love with and like care about. It hurts, but I feel like you could definitely make it work, and I feel like it's helped me too with Tome, and it hurt to cut stuff out, but I think that now it's at a place where I'm really, really proud of it.
And I think that there's a lot to be proud of with that game as well. Just kind of my quick thoughts on that before we wrap up. I did get a chance to play a early edition of Tome. I really enjoyed it. I was able to teach Allie within like 15 minutes or so. And again, that was one of the things that she mentioned immediately opening up the package, was how much she really liked the artwork.
Thank you.
I enjoy the trick taking and how it operates. I love the special powers. It really makes you kind of think with how the game flows, how you want to utilize those special powers, what you want to play, which kind of switches up as you have these new title cards, which are essentially your trump cards coming out. It really provides a different spin on the traditional formula, which I can absolutely appreciate, and I think was really well done.
Thank you.
It's something that's for me, going to stick around for a long, long time to come. And it's something that I'm backing on Kickstarter as well, just so that I can have a copy to give away. But that doesn't mean that my listeners should go out and hope for that giveaway. That means that you should go out and back it and then save the giveaway for somebody else. So, Lauren, anything else that you would like to discuss?
We are halfway through our goal on Kickstarter, and I would love if any of your listeners could come check us out.
Well, definitely go and check out Tome the Light Edition on Kickstarter, and I think that that is going to wrap it up for us for episode 12 of Cardboard Time. Lauren, I want to thank you so much for coming on and being a part of the show today. It was fantastic having you on.
Of course, thank you so much for having me. I've had a lot of fun talking with you about board games and the board game community as a whole.
Well, as always, make sure to check out our Facebook page, check out our Instagram and Twitter at cardboard_time. Make sure to take a look at our Board Game Geek podcast page. If you have any questions, suggestions, or ideas for discussion topics, email cardboardtime@gmail.com. And once again, thanks again for listening, and we'll see you in 2 weeks for another episode of Cardboard Time.